Captain Jack Sparrow, a legend, a scoundrel, a man who always seems to be one step ahead of death itself. He survived mutinies, curses, betrayals, and forces far beyond mortal understanding. He's stolen ships from under the noses of empires, battled men and monsters alike, and somehow, against all odds, he always comes out on the other side. People call it luck, others call it skill, but what if it's neither? Because there's something about Jack Sparrow that doesn't add up, something beneath his seemingly loopy swagger and clever retorts. We like to think of him as a lovable rogue, a pirate with a heart of gold, but that's just a story that he has carefully cultivated. Think about it. No one really knows where Jack came from. No concrete childhood stories, no family ties outside of a few pirates. And when he does speak of his past, the details shift like the tide. And if you look closely, you start to notice the gaps, the years where no one saw him, the people who crossed him and vanished, the way he always seems to know things he shouldn't, the way the ocean itself seems to bend to his will. None of this makes any sense until you see the pattern, until you realize the truth, until you understand what he really is. Because Jack Sparrow is not just a pirate, he's not just a trickster, he's not a survivor, he's actually a...
Alright guys, this is my channel now. My name is Rowan T. Films. I'm a historian studying at Harvard University. Today, we'll be learning about World War II. Specifically, the story of one man, and how despite his struggles in life, he was able to change the world. Our story begins with a young 17-year-old Japanese pilot, PepsiCo Mantobo, born December 32nd, 1924. On December 7th, 1941, Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. Mantobo was sent down to Oahu, Hawaii, along with 352 aircraft fighters, flying the Mitsubishi A6M0. The fighters swiftly took down Pearl Harbor. However, PepsiCo was shot down by American troops. Mantobo miraculously survived, but just barely. His plane slowly sank to the bottom of the ocean floor. In the crushing depths, his own plane imploded in on himself. At the exact same time, just 15 miles offshore, a Pepsi cargo ship was mistakenly sunken by a Japanese pilot. The liquid slowly traveled its way over to Mantobo. Conveniently below where he had crashed, there was an ancient undersea volcano. These two seemingly random events caused a massive chain reaction, which birthed something truly amazing. After Mantobo regained consciousness, he swam all the way to shore. Sitting in the sand, he had a moment to collect himself. As he sat there, he veered into the water below to view his own reflection. What he saw utterly horrified him. His skin was a metallic white, infused with a shining Pepsi logo. He was no longer PepsiCo Mantobo. He was now Pepsi Man! He believed that if the United States were to find him, he'd be executed. So he fled into the forests of Oahu. There, he survived eating the coconuts along with local wildlife, mongoose, birds, and occasionally he would even go out at night and hunt down sea turtles. Turtles were his favorite. Life was difficult for Mantobo. However, for him, it was between bats and death. 3 years later, while Mantobo was hunting for turtles, he was spotted by the Americans. Noticing he was in uniform, at first they considered executing him, as Japanese attitudes toward surrender was rather hostile. Soldier Pep Simmons noticed the Pepsi symbol on his chest. Pep Simmons, being a large fan of the famous soda corporation, decided to take mercy on Mantobo before bringing him to a United States prisoner of war camp. Simmons asked Mantobo for his autograph. Mantobo was brought to the American prisoner of war camp, Camp Carbonate, in Monroe, Wisconsin. There, he struggled for months. He was forced to go through the United States re-education program, which sought to change the fundamental beliefs of the POWs to gain intelligence on the Japanese military. Being utterly defeated, he gave away all his secrets. Mantobo suffered through severe depression, believing that because of the information he revealed and how he helped the Allies, he had failed and betrayed his home country. The United States attempted to repatriate Mantobo back to Japan. Unknown to Mantobo until then, he was bestowed the amazing ability to manifest any type of Pepsi in the thin air. He bargained with the soldiers to let him go, and he would give them a lifetime supply of Pepsi. They agreed. However, what he gave the soldiers was a lifetime supply of Crystal Pepsi. A fate worse than death. He fled to the nearby city of Madison. Mantobo assumed an alternate identity, wearing prosthetic makeup to blend in, taking up a job at a Pepsi Cola factory, being the one missing the ingredients, and secretly infusing the cola with this fluid. For years, he tried to stay under the radar, living in a small cramped apartment. though he often faced blatant racism and discrimination due to his Japanese heritage. Years later, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 allowed for immigration and citizenship within the United States. Finding out about this, Mantoba sought and eventually gained United States residency. In 1956, while working at the Pepsi factory in Madison, he met his soon-to-be wife in the break room, Dottie Cola, born November 2nd, 1931. She was a young Japanese-American woman. While at first, Mantoba being extremely awkward and reserved, they quickly fell in love. For months while getting to know each other, Mantoba didn't tell Dottie about his so-called disfigurement, at least not until he was comfortable enough with her. Already being in love with Mantoba, Dottie was in full support of her boyfriend when she found out. After saving up enough money, PepsiCo Mantoba and Dottie Cola got married in the Chapel of the Eternal Sip on May 27, 1967, the 100th anniversary of Caleb Brandom's birth, the inventor of the holy drink. In 1975, the two moved to Bubbla Vista, California, and began working at a nearby Pepsi factory. Dottie soon became pregnant. While working for Pepsi, he was noticed by the then CEO, Donald M. McCall, for his perfect Pepsi concoction. Working with Donald, he soon devised the perfect marketing strategy, the Pepsi Challenge. And so, begun the Cola War has. The concept of the Pepsi Challenge was simple yet effective. Create a blind taste test to see which people preferred, Coca-Cola or Pepsi. The answer was unanimous. Pepsi won. But Coca-Cola was not ready to give up. Horrified by their loss in sales, Coca-Cola launched their nuclear arsenal onto Bubbla Vista on August 27, 1975, a day that will live in infamy. A day known as the Flattening. Pepsi had attempted to launch a counterattack. However, it was thwarted by the evil Coca-Cola man, launching the missile into space. Nearly the entire population of Bubbla Vista was decimated. Only 2,451 out of the 1,790,000 survived. The casualties included Mantoba's pregnant wife. Mantoba was utterly devastated by this. His prosthetic mask that disguised him as a human was destroyed in the blast. Losing the only person who had ever supported his real self, he moved into a small apartment to devise his decade-long plan. Still recovering from the devastation, completely isolated, Mantoba's mental health began a steep decline. All he had in his life now was Pepsi. Months later, Mantoba filed a letter to the Superior Courts to have his name changed from PepsiCo Mantoba to Pepsi Man. From then on, he swore to take revenge against Coca-Cola and spread the holy drink of Pepsi. Pepsi Man quickly found out that the radiation from the attack had enhanced his body. His new powers include the ability to stop time, however, only for 10 seconds. Superhuman strength, immortality, super jump, and the ability to know when someone's thirst needed to be quenched. He was effectively a super soldier. While the city struggled to rebuild, Pepsi Man ran throughout the streets of Bubbla Vista, delivering Pepsi to those in need. Survivors of the flattening praised him as a godlike hero. On January 17, 1976, while Pepsi Man was patrolling the streets, he witnessed a crime scene like no other. A homeless man named Pat Sipley was found dead in an alleyway, struck in the head 30 times by a Coca-Cola can. Pepsi Man was enraged by this horrifying display of violence and sought to find the murderer and bring him to justice. This single event jump-started Pepsi Man's crime-fighting days. Throughout the next 17 years, Pepsi Man became the first superhero, tracking down communist Coca-Cola's conspirators, punishing criminals, and working as a detective for the police. Throughout this time, he faced many foes and created many powerful enemies, such as the notorious leader of the Coca-Cola Company, Coca-Cola Man, and the traitor to the Pepsi name, Orange Crush Cut, Sprite Boy, and of course, the legendary Dr. Pepper Dude. By the time of the 1990s, the legend of Pepsi Man had spread throughout the entire world. Nobody knew who he was, but they all loved him. Bubbla Vista, by this time, was renamed to Pepsi City. This newfound stardom inspired the creative visionary, Takina Anuki, as well as Pepsi's Japanese branch, to collaborate with Pepsi Man by turning him into their new mascot. Negotiations were initially tense, due to Pepsi Man's apprehension of returning to his home country. However, they were able to compromise by filming all the scenes within the United States. The team developed 13 commercials starring the beloved hero, comically exaggerating his adventures as the Silver Crusader. They developed merchandise around him, bottle caps, action figures, Even his own video game that features Pepsi City and the terrorist attack of 1987, in which Coca-Cola Man sent droves of mislabeled sentient Pepsi cans after Pepsi Man. Later on, the commercials moved from depicting staged events to working with Pepsi Man in the field. Everything had seemed great for Pepsi Man, until one of his last commercials. On August 21st, 1997, while attempting to save a bank from being robbed, Pepsi Man was wearing a yellow face mask to symbolize the Pepsi Twist variant. Unfortunately, the robbers had predicted that Pepsi Man would attempt to thwart their plans, so they framed him by wearing similar yellow face masks. This was revealed later to be a conspiracy by the Coca-Cola empire. Pepsi Man spent months in jail awaiting trial, reminding him too much of the treatment in the POW camp. Pepsi Man tragically took his life on November 5th, 1998, but not before being interviewed by a local historian who had pieced together his life story. To many, Pepsi Man was a legend. To Coca-Cola, he was a ruthless murderer. In time, he became a martyr. I speak to you now all today about this topic because we must break down the chains of the tyrannical Coca-Cola rule. Our Coca-Cola governments had destroyed the very fabric of this once great Pepsi nation. Constant bottle cap surveillance has destroyed our notion of free speech. In writing this, I will most likely be sent to soda gulag. While I still have time, remember the 5th of November for the soda pop bottles treason and plot.